Ben Torres stood at the observation deck of the Earth vessel Harmony, watching the massive Zalani ship drift alongside them in the darkness of space. The alien vessel looked like a crystal palace floating among the stars, its walls glowing with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Ben had been staring at it for weeks now, but he still could not believe he was really here. 3 months ago, Ben had been working at a small cultural center in New Tokyo, teaching art classes to children. Now he was part of the most important diplomatic mission in human history. The Zalani Empire controlled over 200 star systems, and they had finally agreed to meet with Earth's representatives. Ben was only here because Professor Williams had gotten sick at the last moment, and someone needed to fill his spot as a cultural attaché. "Still nervous?" asked Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead diplomat, as she joined him at the window. Ben nodded. "Every day. I keep thinking they made a mistake bringing me here. I'm not qualified for this." Dr. Chen smiled. "You've been doing fine, Ben. The Zalani seem very interested in your presentations about human art and culture. Princess Nira especially asks about you often." That was true. For the past 3 weeks, Ben had been giving daily presentations to the Zalani delegation about human customs, history, and creative expression. The aliens were fascinated by human art, music, and literature. They asked endless questions about why humans created things for beauty rather than just function. Princess Nira was the most curious of all. She was the heir to the Zalani Empire, a being who would one day rule over billions of aliens across hundreds of worlds. She looked mostly humanoid, with pale blue skin and 4 arms instead of 2. Her eyes were large and completely black, and when she focused on something, it felt like she could see straight into your soul. At first, Ben had been terrified of her. The princess was over 7 feet tall, and her presence filled any room she entered. But over the weeks, he had begun to see something else in her. She was lonely. Despite being surrounded by advisors and servants, she seemed hungry for real conversation. She asked Ben questions that had nothing to do with diplomacy, wanting to know about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. "The morning session starts in an hour," Dr. Chen said. "Are you ready?" Ben checked his tablet, which held his notes for today's presentation about human families and relationships. "As ready as I'll ever be." The conference room was located between the 2 ships, in a specially built neutral zone. Ben always felt strange walking through the connecting tube, leaving the familiar metal corridors of the human ship and entering the crystal halls of the Zalani vessel. The Zalani delegation was already seated when Ben arrived. There were 12 of them, all tall and pale blue, arranged in a precise hierarchy. At the center sat Princess Nira, wearing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. To her right was High Counselor Vex, an older male who served as her chief advisor. The others were various ministers, generals, and bureaucrats. The human delegation was much smaller. Dr. Chen led the group, with Ben, Admiral Rodriguez, and 3 other specialists. They looked tiny compared to the imposing aliens. "Good morning," Dr. Chen said as they took their seats. "Today, Cultural Attaché Torres will continue his presentation on human social structures." Ben stood up, trying to keep his hands from shaking. He had given this same presentation dozens of times to human audiences, but something about the way the Zalani stared at him always made him nervous. "Today I want to talk about how humans form relationships," Ben began. "Unlike many species, humans don't have predetermined social roles. We choose our friends, our partners, and our families based on personal connection rather than status or hierarchy." High Counselor Vex leaned forward. "This concept of choice continues to puzzle us. How can a society function without clear ranks and obligations?" "Well," Ben said, pulling up a holographic display, "humans form bonds based on mutual respect and shared interests. For example, friendship. A human can be friends with someone of any social class, age, or background. The only requirement is that they enjoy each other's company and care about each other's well-being." Princess Nira's 4 arms moved in a gesture Ben had learned meant deep interest. This friendship bond requires no formal declaration. No ceremony or contract. Not usually. Sometimes friends make promises to each other, but most friendships grow naturally over time. People just spend time together, share experiences, and gradually develop trust and affection. The alien delegation murmured among themselves in their musical language. Ben caught a few words he recognized, but not enough to follow their conversation. "What about romantic partnerships?" asked Minister Zara, a female with intricate silver markings on her face. "Surely these require formal structure." Ben smiled. Even romantic love is based on choice. Humans fall in love with people who make them happy, who understand them, who share their dreams. We don't arrange marriages based on political advantage or social status, although some cultures used to do that long ago. "Fascinating," Princess Nira said softly. Her black eyes were fixed on Ben with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "And these bonds can form between any individuals? Regardless of their birth circumstances?" "Absolutely. Love doesn't care about where you come from or what your family does. It just happens." High Counselor Vex made a sharp gesture with his lower arms. "Chaos. How does anything get accomplished when individuals simply choose their own paths?" Dr. Chen spoke up. "Actually, humans accomplish great things specifically because of this freedom. When people choose to work together rather than being forced to, they're more creative, more dedicated, and more innovative." The session continued for 2 more hours, with Ben fielding increasingly complex questions about human relationships, family structures, and social bonds. The Zalani seemed particularly confused by the idea that humans could love someone without owning them or being owned by them. As the meeting ended, Princess Nira approached Ben. The other aliens immediately stepped back, giving her space as protocol demanded. "Cultural attaché Torres," she said, her voice like music. "I wonder if you might join me for lunch. I have more questions about your presentation." Ben glanced at Dr. Chen, who nodded. "Of course, Your Highness." The princess led him through corridors he had never seen before, deeper into the Zalani ship. The walls here were covered in flowing script that seemed to move and change as they walked. Soft music played from hidden speakers, harmonies that sounded like wind chimes and whale songs mixed together. They entered a small dining chamber with a transparent ceiling that showed the stars above. A low table was set with what Ben assumed was Zalani food, though nothing looked familiar. "Please, sit," Princess Nira said, settling gracefully onto cushions arranged around the table. "I ordered some foods that should be safe for human consumption. Our scientists have been studying your dietary needs." Ben sat down carefully. "Thank you, Your Highness. You didn't need to go to so much trouble. Please, call me Nira. When we are alone like this, formality seems unnecessary." She selected a small blue fruit from a bowl and bit into it delicately. "Tell me, Ben Torres, do you have friends back on Earth?" The question surprised him. "Yes, of course. Quite a few." "Describe one to me." Ben thought about it. "Well, there's my friend Maya. We met in college. She's an engineer now, working on the Mars terraforming project. She's brilliant, funny, and incredibly stubborn. When she believes in something, she'll argue about it for hours." "And you enjoy this arguing?" Ben laughed. "Actually, yes. Maya challenges me to think differently. She never lets me get away with lazy thinking or easy answers. Sometimes she drives me crazy, but she also makes me better." Nira's black eyes widened. "She makes you better? How?" "By caring enough to push me. By believing I'm capable of more than I think I am. Good friends see the best in each other and help bring it out." Nira was quiet for a long moment, absently turning a piece of fruit over in her upper hands while her lower hands remained still in her lap. "In Zalani society," she finally said, "relationships are based on position and obligation. I have advisors because they are assigned to me. I have servants because they are born to serve. I have guards because it is their duty to protect me. That sounds lonely. It is. The admission seemed to surprise her. I had never thought of it that way until I began listening to your presentations. But yes, it is very lonely. No one speaks to me because they want to. They speak to me because they must. Ben felt a wave of sympathy for her. What about your family? Your parents? The Emperor and Empress are my parents, but they are also my rulers. Every conversation we have is about my duties, my education, my future role. I cannot remember the last time someone asked me about my thoughts or feelings simply because they cared about the answer. Ben realized he was seeing something no human had ever seen before, the private pain of an alien princess who had everything except what she wanted most. What do you think about? He asked gently. When you're alone, what occupies your mind? Nira looked surprised again, as if no one had ever asked her such a question. I think about the stars, she said slowly. I wonder what it would be like to visit them not as a representative of the Empire, but just as myself. I think about the music of other worlds, the art of different species. I think about what it would be like to have a conversation where I could say anything without worrying about diplomatic consequences. Like this one? Yes, she said, and for the first time since Ben had known her, she smiled. The expression transformed her face completely, making her look younger and somehow more alive. Like this one. They talked for hours. Nira asked Ben about his childhood, his family, his dreams. In return, she told him about life in the Zalani court, the burden of knowing she would one day rule an empire, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who treated her as a symbol rather than a person. Ben found himself forgetting she was an alien princess. She was just Nira, someone who laughed at his stories and listened carefully to his opinions. Someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding him as a person. When Ben finally returned to the human ship, Dr. Chen was waiting for him with a concerned expression. How did it go? She asked. Fine, Ben said. She had questions about human friendships and families. Nothing politically sensitive. Good. Ben, I need to warn you about something. We're picking up concerning chatter from the Zalani ship. Some of the princess's advisors seem unhappy about her interest in human culture. High Counselor Vex in particular has been sending encrypted messages back to the Zalani homeworld. Ben felt a chill. What kind of messages? We can't decode them, but our analysis suggests they're complaints about the princess's behavior. She's been spending a lot of time in these cultural sessions, and some of her people apparently think she's becoming too influenced by human ideas. Is that bad? It could be. The Zalani are very concerned about maintaining their traditional power structures. If they think the princess is being corrupted by democratic or egalitarian ideas, they might end the negotiations entirely. Ben went to bed that night with a knot of worry in his stomach. Over the next few days, the tension on the Zalani ship became obvious. High Counselor Vex grew more hostile during diplomatic sessions. Other advisors began interrupting whenever Princess Nira asked questions about human culture. The breaking point came a week later. Ben was giving a presentation about human artistic expression when High Counselor Vex suddenly stood up. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through Ben's explanation of how humans use art to explore emotions. This session is terminated. Princess Nira's 4 arms moved in what Ben now recognized as anger. Counselor Vex, I did not authorize you to end this session. Your Highness, Vex replied, his tone formally respectful but clearly firm. I am invoking Protocol 7 under Imperial Decree 1847. You have been exposed to dangerous ideological contamination and require immediate isolation and cleansing. The room erupted. The human delegation looked confused and alarmed, while the other Zalani advisors began speaking rapidly in their own language. Princess Nira stood up to her full height, towering over everyone else in the room. I will not submit to ideological cleansing, she declared. I am the heir to the empire. Which is precisely why this contamination cannot be allowed to spread, High Counselor Vex replied. Your Highness, you have begun to exhibit dangerous thought patterns. You question established hierarchies, you express interest in egalitarian concepts, and you have formed an inappropriate emotional attachment to alien ideas and individuals. Ben felt the blood drain from his face as Vex's black eyes fixed on him. The human Torres will be confined to his ship, Vex continued. All cultural exchange sessions are permanently suspended. Your Highness will undergo memory adjustment to remove the contaminated thoughts, and then we will proceed with the original diplomatic protocols. Memory adjustment? Dr. Chen stood up. You're talking about forcibly altering the princess's mind? The princess is not well, Vex said coldly. She has been infected with chaotic human concepts of choice and individual freedom. These ideas are incompatible with proper Zalani society and her role as future empress. The adjustment will restore her to her proper state of mind. Princess Nira's voice was dangerously quiet. And if I refuse? Then you will be declared unfit to rule, and the succession will pass to your cousin Prince Kaler. The peace negotiations will continue under his authority. Ben realized what was happening. The princess's advisors were staging a coup, using her interest in human culture as justification to remove her from power. If they succeeded, not only would Nira lose everything she was meant to inherit, but the entire alliance between humans and Zalani could collapse. Princess Nira stood perfectly still for a long moment, her black eyes moving from face to face around the room. When her gaze reached Ben, something seemed to solidify in her expression. Very well, she said. But by ancient law, I have the right to make one final declaration before I submit to the Council's judgment. High Counselor Vex looked suspicious but nodded. Ancient law is still binding. You may make your declaration. Princess Nira walked slowly around the table until she stood directly in front of Ben. Her forearms moved in a complex pattern that Ben didn't recognize, but the other Zalani in the room gasped. I, Princess Nira of the Zalani Empire, heir to the Crystal Throne, declare this human under my personal protection according to the laws of claiming established in the First Dynasty, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Let it be witnessed by both our peoples that Ben Torres is now bound to me by the strongest bonds our society recognizes. Before Ben could react, before anyone could stop her, Princess Nira's forearms wrapped around him in an embrace that was both gentle and unbreakable. Her action sent shockwaves through both delegations. High Counselor Vex stepped backward as if he had been struck. Your Highness, you cannot. The laws of claiming have not been invoked for over 1,000 years. But they remain valid, Nira replied, not releasing Ben from her embrace. And now they protect both of us. You cannot force memory adjustment on me while I maintain a claimed bond, and you cannot harm my claimed without declaring war on the royal bloodline itself. The room fell into stunned silence. Ben could feel the warmth of the princess's body against his, could sense the rapid beating of what he assumed was her heart. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but he knew everything had changed. The ancient laws of claiming that Princess Nira had invoked were designed to protect members of the royal family by allowing them to declare unbreakable bonds with chosen protectors. But in claiming Ben, she had done something unprecedented in Zalani history. She had claimed an alien. And now both their fates were bound together in ways that neither species fully understood. The silence in the conference room stretched like a taut wire. Ben could feel every eye in the room focused on him and Princess Nira, still wrapped in her protective embrace. His heart hammered against his chest as he tried to process what had just happened. High Counselor Vex was the first to speak, his voice tight with controlled anger. Your Highness, this action is unprecedented. The laws of claiming were created for Zalani nobility, not for alien species. Princess Nira finally released Ben from her embrace but remained close beside him. The ancient texts make no mention of species limitations, Counselor. The law states that any being may be claimed for protection by royal decree. I have followed the law exactly as it was written. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in despite the chaos. Perhaps we should all take a moment to understand what this means before we make any hasty decisions. What it means, Vex said coldly, is that Her Highness has tied the fate of the Zalani Empire to an alien creature. This claiming bond cannot be broken except by death or mutual release. Until one of those occurs, the princess cannot undergo the necessary ideological cleansing. Ben felt his stomach drop. Death? Princess Nira placed one of her hands gently on his shoulder. The claiming bond is sacred in our culture. It creates a connection that our people consider unbreakable. But Ben, you must understand, I would never ask you to give up your life or your freedom. This was my choice, made to protect both of us. Admiral Rodriguez, who had remained silent throughout the morning's crisis, finally spoke up. What exactly does this claiming mean for both our peoples? We need to understand the full implications. Minister Zara, who had always seemed more moderate than Vex, answered carefully. In Zalani law, a claimed individual becomes part of the royal family structure. They cannot be harmed without severe consequences, and they gain certain rights and protections. However, traditionally, claiming also implies ownership and absolute loyalty. Ownership? Ben repeated, alarmed. That is the traditional interpretation, Princess Nira said quickly. But I believe we can create a new interpretation, one that honors both Zalani law and human values. High Counselor Vex made a harsh sound of disapproval. Your Highness continues to demonstrate the dangerous influence of human ideas. The claiming bond has functioned perfectly for thousands of years. It cannot and should not be modified to accommodate alien sensibilities. The tension in the room was becoming unbearable. Ben could see that both delegations were struggling with the implications of what had happened. The humans looked confused and worried, while the Zalani advisors appeared split between outrage and uncertainty. Perhaps, Dr. Chen suggested diplomatically, we should suspend these discussions for today. Both sides need time to consult with their governments and consider their options. Agreed, Vex said immediately. But let it be clear that until this situation is resolved, no further cultural exchanges will take place. The human delegation will remain on their ship, and Her Highness will be confined to quarters pending a decision from the Imperial Council. Princess Nira's 4 arms moved in a gesture of defiance. I will not be confined. Under the laws of claiming, I have the right to remain with my claimed individual to ensure their protection. This created another standoff. Ben could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads as they tried to figure out how to navigate this unprecedented situation. Finally, Dr. Chen proposed a compromise. What if we arrange for Princess Nira and Ben to meet in the neutral zone between our ships? That way, neither side's territory is violated, and the princess can fulfill her obligations under Zalani law while we work toward a solution. It took hours of negotiation, but eventually both sides agreed to this temporary arrangement. Ben found himself in the strange position of being at the center of an interstellar diplomatic crisis, something he never could have imagined when he woke up that morning. That evening, Ben met Princess Nira in the small conference room that served as neutral territory. She looked tired, and her usual regal composure seemed strained. I owe you an explanation, she said as soon as they were alone. And an apology. I acted without considering how this would affect you. Ben sat down across from her. I won't lie, I'm scared. But I also understand why you did it. They were going to erase your memories, change who you are. That's not right. In my culture, individual desires are always secondary to social stability. What I want, what I think, what I feel, these things are considered unimportant compared to my duty as future empress. Nira's voice was quiet but intense. But listening to your presentations about human relationships, I began to understand that there might be another way. What do you mean? Humans form bonds based on mutual respect and shared goals, correct? You work together not because you are forced to, but because you choose to. This creates stronger relationships than our system of obligation and hierarchy. Ben nodded. That's true, but how does that help us now? Princess Nira leaned forward, her black eyes bright with excitement. What if we could show both our peoples that the claiming bond doesn't have to mean ownership? What if we could demonstrate that a relationship based on choice and mutual respect is actually stronger than one based on force and tradition? I'm listening. In claiming you, I have created a bond that cannot be broken by the Imperial Council. But the nature of that bond is something we can define together. Instead of the traditional model where the claimed individual becomes property, we could create something new. A partnership. Ben felt a spark of hope. You mean like a diplomatic partnership? Where we work together as equals? Exactly. We could become cultural ambassadors, showing both our species that cooperation between equals creates better results than domination or submission. The idea was intriguing, but Ben could see immediate problems. What about your advisors? Vex will never accept that kind of arrangement. Vex represents the old way of thinking. But not all Zalani feel the same way. Minister Zara and several others have been quietly expressing doubts about the rigid traditional system. They see how human innovation and creativity stem from your freedom to choose your own paths. Over the following days, Ben and Princess Nira worked together to develop their proposal. They spent hours in the neutral zone, crafting arguments and anticipating objections. Ben learned more about Zalani culture and history, while Nira deepened her understanding of human social structures. The more they worked together, the more Ben realized how intelligent and thoughtful Nira was. She had been forced to hide her curiosity and creativity behind royal protocol, but in their private discussions, her mind was sharp and innovative. She asked questions that challenged Ben's assumptions and offered insights that made him see familiar concepts in new ways. In human culture, Ben explained during one of their sessions, leadership is often about inspiring others to work toward a common goal. The best leaders don't force obedience, they earn respect and trust. That concept would terrify the Imperial Council, Nira replied. But it also explains why human societies advance so quickly. When people choose to follow, they contribute their best efforts. When they are forced to obey, they do only the minimum required. Exactly. And that's what we need to show them. That a claiming bond based on mutual choice could actually strengthen both our positions. On the 5th day after the claiming incident, both delegations gathered again in the neutral zone. High Counselor Vex looked grim, while Dr. Chen appeared cautiously optimistic. Ben and Princess Nira had requested permission to present their proposal to both sides. Honored delegates, Princess Nira began, standing tall in her formal robes. Cultural attaché Torres and I have spent considerable time exploring the implications of our claiming bond. We believe we have found a solution that honors both Zalani tradition and human values. High Counselor Vex looked skeptical. Proceed, Your Highness. The claiming bond creates an unbreakable connection between two individuals, Nira continued. Traditionally, this bond has been interpreted as ownership, with the claimed individual serving the one who claimed them. However, the ancient texts do not actually specify the nature of the relationship, only its permanence. Ben stepped forward. What Princess Nira and I propose is a new interpretation of the claiming bond. Instead of ownership, we suggest partnership. Instead of domination and submission, we propose mutual respect and collaboration. Impossible, Vex interrupted. The claiming bond has always represented hierarchy. The claimed individual exists to serve the one who claimed them. With respect, Counselor, Ben replied, that interpretation assumes that strength comes from controlling others. But human experience suggests that true strength comes from working with others as equals. Minister Zara spoke up for the first time. How would such a partnership function in practice? Princess Nira smiled. Ben and I would serve as cultural ambassadors, representing both our species in future diplomatic endeavors. Our bond would demonstrate that Zalani and humans can work together not as master and servant, but as partners with different strengths and perspectives. Dr. Chen looked intrigued. What would this mean for the peace negotiations? Instead of a traditional treaty where one side dominates the other, Ben explained, we could create an alliance based on mutual benefit and respect. Zalani expertise in organization and long-term planning could complement human innovation and adaptability. High Counselor Vex made a dismissive gesture. Pretty words, but how does this address the real concern? Her Highness has been contaminated with dangerous ideas about individual choice and equality. These concepts threaten the stability of our entire social order. Do they? Princess Nira challenged. Or do they offer an opportunity to strengthen our society? Consider this, Counselor. Human civilizations have advanced faster in the past 3 centuries than most species do in millennia. Why? Because they allow individuals to pursue their talents freely instead of forcing everyone into predetermined roles. Chaos, Vex muttered. Innovation, Ben countered. When people are free to choose their paths, they find solutions that rigid hierarchies would never discover. That's not chaos, that's creative problem solving. The debate continued for hours, with both sides presenting arguments and counterarguments. Slowly, Ben began to notice that some of the Zalani advisors were listening with genuine interest rather than automatic opposition. Minister Zara asked thoughtful questions about human governance structures. Even a few of the military representatives seemed curious about human tactical innovations. Finally, Princess Nira made the crucial argument. Honored advisors, consider what we stand to gain. If Ben and I can demonstrate that a claiming bond based on partnership creates stronger results than traditional domination, we will have proven that Zalani law is even more powerful and flexible than we believed. If we fail, you can always return to the old ways. And if this experiment damages the Empire's reputation? Vex demanded. Then we will face the consequences together, Ben said firmly. That's what partnership means. We succeed together or we fail together. The discussion that followed was intense but gradually became more constructive. The Zalani delegation began asking practical questions about how the partnership would work, what safeguards would exist, and how success would be measured. Dr. Chen offered the human perspective. From Earth's standpoint, this partnership could be incredibly valuable. Ben would gain first-hand knowledge of Zalani culture and governance, while Princess Nira would understand human innovation and democratic processes. They could serve as bridges between our civilizations. The claiming bond would ensure that neither side could abandon the partnership casually, Minister Zara added thoughtfully. It provides the stability that Zalani culture requires while allowing for the flexibility that humans value. After 3 days of intense negotiations, an agreement began to take shape. Ben and Princess Nira would indeed serve as cultural ambassadors, with their claiming bond representing a new type of relationship between their species. They would spend time on both Earth and the Zalani homeworld, learning about each other's societies and reporting back to their respective governments. Most importantly, their partnership would be evaluated based on results rather than tradition. If their collaboration produced beneficial outcomes for both species, it would serve as a model for future relationships. If it failed, both sides could return to more conventional diplomatic arrangements. High Counselor Vex remained opposed to the end, but he was gradually outvoted by other Zalani advisors who saw the potential benefits of the arrangement. The final agreement required approval from both the Earth government and the Zalani Imperial Council, but the framework was established. On the day the formal agreement was signed, Ben stood beside Princess Nira in the Neutral Zone conference room, watching representatives from 2 civilizations put their names to a document that would change both their futures. Are you ready for this? Nira asked quietly as the ceremony concluded. Ben looked at her, this alien princess who had risked everything to protect her right to choose her own path and his right to exist as himself rather than as someone's property. Over the past weeks, she had become something he had never expected, a true friend and partner. Yes, he said with certainty. I think we're going to prove that the best bonds are the ones we choose freely. Princess Nira's 4 arms moved in the gesture he now knew meant deep happiness. Together, we will show both our peoples that strength comes not from domination, but from unity built on respect and trust. The claiming bond that had begun as a desperate act of defiance had become something entirely new, a symbol of cooperation between species, a bridge between different ways of thinking, and proof that the most powerful connections are those based on mutual choice rather than force. Ben Torres, who had started this journey as a nervous cultural attaché, was now the first human to hold an official position in Zilani society. More than that, he was Princess Nira's partner in creating a new model for interstellar relationships, one that honored both the Zilani need for stability and the human desire for freedom. As they prepared to begin their work as cultural ambassadors, both Ben and Nira knew they were embarking on an adventure that would test everything they believed about friendship, partnership, and the possibility of understanding across the vast differences that separated their species. But they faced that challenge together, bound not by ancient laws of ownership, but by their shared commitment to proving that the strongest bonds are always the ones we choose to create.